All right. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another live episode of the Mr. Islam Answers Back show. And we got another good one for you. Another refutation of another hater. Right? So it's time to refute and expose another hater and to show you the error of their ways, to show you that they don't actually do proper research. So, before we actually really start, let me invite some people. All right, we got the YouTube going live, so you'll be able to see the notes and things that we share with you, and you'll have people listening here on Clubhouse. So we want to just give a few moments for people to join in, and then we'll get started. All right, so those who are here now, we got 2 people here right now. Go ahead and invite people on your list. Let me go ahead and do another invite myself, and then we can go ahead and get started with the details because I don't want you guys to miss it. All right, so I'm gonna try to invite as many people to get. I know there's some rooms going on right now, but yeah, still we want to try to get as many people as we can because y'all don't want to miss this. It's gonna be good information. Good information. So let's get it. Let me invite as many as we can. All right, let's go. Some people are not online, no problem. Let's see here. All right. Invite that brother. Let's invite that brother right there. Okay. All right, so we got a couple of people up on there. Let's see. Just waiting for a few people on the YouTube also to get involved. So let's give it a few moments on that one. Okay. All right, let's just get rolling. And those who missed it, you just have to catch up as we go along. All right. All right. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, we begin in the name of Allah. We begin with the name of Allah. We bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is His last and final messenger. So, as you could see, we are dealing with another well-known hater, Mr. StudyToShow that he doesn't study, actually. So basically, the claim is this. There's this claim that's been going around that first they used to say Muhammad said it. Then I guess they realized that Muhammad ibn Ishaq is not the Prophet Muhammad. And then they stopped saying that. But in any case, the claim is that Ibn Ishaq somehow proves that the Gospel of John was written that the Gospel of John was written by John, right? No, by the way, no, Jesus, the Prophet Muhammad comes after him as the last and final messenger, right? So, but as I was saying, right, so the claim is that Ibn Ishaq somehow proves that John wrote the Gospel of John, right? And of course, this is false. But they get this from Ibn Ishaq's Life of Muhammad, right? Life of Muhammad. So let's take a look at it. I'm going to show it on the screen, right? We'll show it on the screen. Here it is right here, showing on the screen. For those who are watching, that is on YouTube. Oops, I made a mistake. Let me go back. Okay, here it is right here. So for those who are looking on YouTube, all right, I want you to follow my cursor right here. Here is where they get the reference from. It is page 103, The Life of Muhammad of Ibn Ishaq, but it's translated, of course, by Mr. I don't know how to say this guy's name, Goulamay. Oh, yeah. But here's what it says, as you guys can follow my cursor, those who are watching on YouTube. It says, the word applied to the apostle of God in the gospel. Now, as you notice, Ibn Ishaq is just saying that these are the things that have reached him. He says, among the things which have reached me about what Jesus, the son of Mary, stated in the gospel, which he received from God for the followers of the gospel, in applying a term to describe the apostle of God is, okay, then we go to the next page. Oops, where is it? Is the following right here. Now we on 104. Follow the cursor. Y'all see my cursor. Those who are watching on YouTube, is the following. It is extracted from what John the apostle set down for them when he wrote the gospel for them from the testament of Jesus, son of Mary. And then he goes on to quote the supposed statement or whatever. So basically what Ibn Ishaq is saying is that this is some stuff that has come to him. He doesn't say where it came from, though, as you can tell, right? He doesn't say it came from the prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He doesn't say it came from any of the companions. He doesn't name anybody. So as you can see, this doesn't count as anything, because he's just saying this is. So basically we could assume that this came to him through hearsay and rumors, since he doesn't tell us who gave it to him, right? He doesn't say that the prophet Muhammad said that John wrote John, or whatever the case may be. He doesn't say that Ibn Abbas told him, or Ali told him, or Umar ibn al-Khattab. He doesn't name anybody who supposedly gave this to him. So at the most, it's just basically hearsay. He's just saying, hey, look, this is what has come to me. This is the hearsay. This is the rumor, etc., that has come to me. It was extracted from what John the apostle set down for them when he wrote the gospel for them from the New Testament of Jesus, son of Mary. And then, like I said, he goes on to quote this. Now, according to him, he's saying that, I don't know, again, he's saying that this is what has come to him from the gospel of John. And he believed that this refers to Muhammad, that this is speaking of the coming of the prophet Muhammad after Jesus, for those who don't know. So again, Ibn Ishaq is saying that this portion of the gospel of John seems to indicate that or seems to speak of the coming of the prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him and peace be upon Jesus, that this seems to speak of the coming of the prophet Muhammad after Jesus, right? That's according to Ibn Ishaq, right? But again, the point we're focusing on is that the StudyToShow and others have used this as a supposed claim that Ibn Ishaq was confirming that the Gospel of John was written by John. But again, as we see from when you read from the previous page, he's just saying that this is what has come to him. And again, he doesn't tell us where it came from. He doesn't name anybody. He doesn't say the prophet told him. He doesn't say anybody of authority in Islam told him this. So therefore, StudyToShow and the others, you don't have any point. You don't have any evidence. You don't have any point that this confirms that John wrote John, right? This doesn't confirm that John, the Gospel of John, was written by John by any Muslim person of reputability. Okay. So again, look at the previous page. All he says is that this is what came to him, right? See here, everybody, follow the cursor. Look what he says again. Among the things which have reached me about what Jesus, the son of Mary, stated in the gospel which he received from God for the followers of the gospel, right? Again, he doesn't say where it reached him from. Okay, so it doesn't prove anything, right? It doesn't prove that the Gospel of John was actually written by John, because Muhammad ibn Ishaq is saying that these are things that reached him. So it doesn't suffice as anything. To further refute the use of Ibn Ishaq in general, right, is that StudyToShow, again showing that he actually StudyToShow that he doesn't study, is that he tried to make the claim in a room the other day that, hey, this is Ibn Ishaq, and see, you got to accept him. He's from the second second generation, right? Because he's supposed to be from Ibn Ishaq said to be from the 8th century, right? So he said you can't deny him because he's from the second generation, and the prophet said that the first 3 generations are good. Yeah, you could have had a point with that, except that even other scholars, even other contemporaries of Ibn Ishaq, said that Ibn Ishaq wasn't reliable. So therefore, that argument is lost again, because Ibn Ishaq, he wasn't a scholar of hadith or tafsir or anything of this nature. He had no he had no expertise in those areas. So let's take a look at what scholars said about Ibn Ishaq and why you're further refuted. Study to show. That's right. We're going to throw Ibn Ishaq under the bus, and we have evidence to do so. So you're using a guy who was said to be unreliable. Some even went as far as to harshly condemn him as an outright liar. And you're using that as your proof. Even in what you use, he doesn't actually confirm. He's just saying this is what came to him. Doesn't say it came to him from what source that you could have any authority upon it. But let's read. Again, those who are watching on YouTube, you can see the evidence presented here. But let's take a look at what they say about Ibn Ishaq. So we have Imam Malik. Who was Imam Malik? What did Imam Malik have to say about Ibn Ishaq? Right? Imam Malik, he's the famous writer of what they call the Muwatta of Imam Malik, the Hadith collection. Right? He lived closest. He's one of the Imams who lived closest to the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Right? He was born more than 80 years after the death of the Prophet. Imam Malik was a compiler of respected hadith. So as you know, he actually was an expert in hadith, whereas Ibn Ishaq was not, right? Again, he wrote what they call the Muwatta of Imam Malik, which is a hadith collection. He was a hadith scholar, right? Imam Malik called Ibn Ishaq a liar, everybody. Yes, outright. He outright called matter of fact, you know what? Let me share with you guys that evidence. Right, so that way you see we're not just talking. Let me share the actual evidence so you can see the sources yourself. Let me let this load up. All right. Let me post that for you. All right. Don't forget, brothers and sisters, if you want these notes for yourself, remember, join the Patreon, right? Or take notes as you listen. But if you want the notes already laid out for you, I will have these notes put on my Patreon as well. So that way you can reference them yourself. So when you come across these haters, these same liars with these same claims, you can easily just pull it up, right? You can just pull out your notes and refute them. So either take notes now, or if you want everything laid out for you, join my Patreon, which is, you can see it here on YouTube or here on Clubhouse. Just go to my profile, see the Patreon, become a supporter in support of the dawah work that I do and the refutations that I put my work in to give you. And you'll have the notes that you can use for yourselves to study and be able to refute these people with their claims. But there it is right there. As you can see, that is the link that gives you the references, right? It has what they say and the references to refutations of Ibn Ishaq. We're going to give a shout out to answeringchristianclaims.com. This is where it's from, but I'm going to, obviously I'll take things, put them in note fashion, and then you can use these references yourselves, right? You can use these references yourselves to refute these people. Just hold off on coming to the stage, everybody, until I give all the information. Then we can open it up, inshallah. All right. So what does Imam Malik say about Ibn Ishaq? It says, Imam Malik called Ibn Ishaq a liar, straight up a liar, and an imposter for writing false stories about Prophet Muhammad. Imam Malik has said that Ibn Ishaq reports traditions on the authority of the Jews, and the references given. I'm going to scroll down and you can see the references given. All right. Ibn Ishaq was condemned by some of our major Islamic scholars. Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah said, Allah has provided evidence, i.e. isnad, establishing the authenticity or lack thereof of the narrations that are necessary in matters of religion. It is well known that most of what was reported in aspects of tafsir is similar to narrations reporting Maghazi or Sirah and battles, promoting Imam Ahmed to state that three matters do not have isnad: tafsir, malahim, that means great battles, and maghazi. This is because most of their narrations are of the mursil, or plural for mursal, meaning these are the type such as narrations reported by, and mursal means like it's disconnected. That's the statement. That's the type of hadith that's disconnected, meaning it's disconnected from another person in the chain. Therefore, it's like almost impossible that whoever's narrating it in a later generation could have gotten it from somebody from an earlier generation. They're disconnected. They don't know the previous people before them, so they couldn't have actually heard this narration from anybody. So that's what mursal is, right? And says such as narrations reported by Urwa ibn al-Zubair, Ash-Shabi, Az-Zuhri, and Musa ibn Uqba, and Ibn Ishaq. Ibn Ishaq is included in people who report narrations that are disconnected. That's what Ibn Taymiyyah said. Imam Malik was not the only contemporary by Ibn Ishaq to have problems with him. Despite writing the earliest biography of Prophet Muhammad, scholars such as Al-Nasa'i and Yahya bin Qatan did not view Ibn Ishaq as a reliable or authoritative source of hadith. Again, the sources are given. Again, if you check that link up top, you can get it. If you're watching on YouTube, you can get it. And again, like I said, I will share this with you, on my Patreon, or like I said, you can just take notes while I'm talking. But if you're not the type of person who takes notes, then join the Patreon and we'll have this all, laid out for you in proper fashion. So again, you can study this and have it ready for your own personal use. Just become a supporter of my work and the dawah that I do, my content, and hey, you can get it right there. So again, it says that they did not review Ibn Ishaq as a reliable or authoritative source of hadith. Though some thought his use of collective isnad problematized his hadith, several people went so far as to call Ibn Ishaq a liar on matters of hadith. Others claim Ibn Ishaq included verses in his sirah that he knew were not authentic. What others said about Ibn Ishaq? Ibn Ishaq being the solitary narrator, i.e. there is no chain for it that does not involve Ibn Ishaq. Solitary reports of Ibn Ishaq are not reliable. So as we just read from the book, he said this is what came to him of the gospel or something of these things that were written. But again, notice he doesn't provide any reference. He doesn't say this came to me from so-and-so. This came to me from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. This came to me from Ali or Umar or Abu Bakr or Zayd, or he doesn't give anything. So according to the scholars, study to show you don't study. This account is unreliable. Plus, again, like I said, it's not like Ibn Ishaq, is known as some type of authority on hadith or anything of that nature or anything anyway. See what I'm saying? So unfortunately for you, you showing that you study that you don't study, right? Showing to study that you don't actually study. Because if you would have known, it's better for you to just leave Ibn Ishaq, because the Muslims are going to be able to refute me by showing that he was unreliable. He was known as unreliable. I always tell you guys, if you want to try to get us, why don't you try to make sure that whatever you're bringing against us, it can't be refuted. It can't be tossed aside. It can't be knocked down because it's unreliable, because it's weak, because it's disconnected, because it's a fabricated hadith. Why don't you make sure that you do that before you come with these arguments? But you know what? Like I said, no problem. I don't mind, because it does me great joy to refute you and expose that you're not studying, that you're actually not studying. You're coming with these flimsy arguments. You're using weak reports, weak people, weak narrators, like you're doing with Ibn Ishaq. Now you see you lost again. You lost again. Ibn Ishaq is not reliable. And even again, in what he said, he still doesn't really confirm that the Gospel of John was written by John. He says, this is what came to me. This is what came to me. He doesn't say, and again, he doesn't say where. From who? By who? Who told you this? Ibn Ishaq? Did you get it from the Prophet? He doesn't say. Did you get it from a companion? No, he doesn't say. He just says, this is what came to me. So the most we could assume is that he's telling us that this came to him by way of rumors and hearsay. Rumors and hearsay, this came to him that John wrote the Gospel of John. Not a proof, bro. Not a proof. Sorry, you lose again. So let's continue. Imam Malik was not, as I said, was not the only contemporary. They went so far as to call him a liar on matters of hadith and claimed that he included things that were not authentic. What others said about Ibn Ishaq? Ibn Ishaq being the solitary narrator, i.e. there is no chain for it that does not involve Ibn Ishaq. Solitary reports of Ibn Ishaq are not reliable. Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal was asked about the solitary reports of Ibn Ishaq if they are considered reliable. He said no. He said no. If you have reports from Ibn Ishaq by himself, no. And this one that you read from the Life of Muhammad, page 103, 104, it clearly is from himself. Therefore, it's not reliable, Mr. Study to show that you don't study. Because if you would have studied to show that you studied, you wouldn't have used this. Because you'd be like, you know what, man, if I use this, the Muslims are going to be able to knock me down. And guess what? We're knocking you down, bro. You're getting knocked down. Okay? They're not considered reliable. He said no. See, Tadhib al-Tadhib, they're given all these references. Da'ira, Ma'arif, Nizamiya, Hybridad 1326, volume 9, page 43. There are several chainless stories that exist in Ibn Ishaq's work. We don't know who these missing people are. We don't know if they are Muslims, non-Muslims, hypocrites acting as Muslims and purposely spreading lies, etc. So, if we are not sure who the people in the missing links are, how can we apply the principle of embarrassment to the narrations? We can only apply this principle if we were to know that the person is a trustworthy Muslim who would definitely have no motive to lie and make up something derogatory about the Prophet, peace be upon him. However, for all we know, the people in the missing link could be people known for fabricating narrations. You can't apply this principle to these narrations since we are not sure who the people in the missing link are. We can't confidently go ahead and apply this principle to this situation. All right. They also tell us the brother who wrote the article, the original form of Ibn Ishaq's Sirat Rasulullah is lost. Right. So that's another thing. They don't even have the original version of it. They get it by using some of the stuff that they say from his students or from Ibn Hisham, who is the editor of Ibn Ishaq's biography, admitted to removing certain stories from Ibn Ishaq's work, etc. Okay. So this is the issue with Ibn Ishaq, okay, and the many who said that he was not reliable, and again, others said he was an outright liar. I mean, that's like, man, that destroyed you. You know what I mean? You got people saying you're an outright liar. You know what I mean? So, what more needs to be said? You know what I'm saying? When you have other scholars of repute telling us that the man is an outright liar. Okay, so I'm showing on the screen. Like I said, the sources for these claims are there. Here, as you can see, I'm showing on YouTube, and on the link that I posted, yeah, the biography should be there as well. So all the things that are cited about Ibn Ishaq being said to be a liar by Imam Malik, Ibn Taymiyyah, etc., the references are given here, as you see on the screen. Okay, here, as you see on the screen, is where the references are for where these statements were made by some of the scholars or the books containing their statements that Ibn Ishaq was said to be a liar. Okay. So now, with that being shown, right? With that being shown about Ibn Ishaq, his problems, and him being said to be outright a liar by some of the scholars of the past, let's go further and look at why the Gospel of John was not written by John, right? So whatever Ibn Ishaq is saying, we showed it doesn't prove that the Gospel of John was written by John, right? So let's go ahead and look at some of the reasons why the Gospel of John was not written by John. For those who are on Clubhouse, I'm going to a site. It's called earlychristianwritings.com. And here they speak of the Gospel of John. Here's what it says. Information on Gospel of John. Information on Gospel of John. Robert Kaiser writes the following on the authorship of the Gospel of John from the Anchor Bible Dictionary, Volume 3, page 919 to 920. It says, the supposition that the author was one and the same with the beloved disciple is often advanced as a means of ensuring that the evangelist did witness Jesus' ministry. Two other passages are advanced as evidence of the same. That is John chapter 19, verse 35 and John 21, 24. But both falter under close scrutiny. John 19:35 does not claim that the author was the one who witnessed the scene, but only that the scene is related on the sound basis of eyewitness. 21:24 is part of the appendix of the gospel and should not be assumed to have come from the same hand as that responsible for the body of the gospel. Neither of these passages, therefore, persuades many Johannine scholars that the author claims eyewitness status. Okay, and of course, we always talk about the John 21:24 verse, because when you read it, what does it say? I got it on the screen now. It says, "This is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true." So as you can see, it's clear that whoever's writing this is obviously not the author, or rather claiming to be John the apostle. He's just saying, hey, look, this is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true. We know his testimony is true. So the person who's writing this is saying that he knows that the disciple who testifies and wrote these things down, he's claiming that the testimony of that person is true, but he doesn't say directly who that person is. And obviously it's not that disciple that is writing this. It's clearly somebody else writing this, saying that he knows that that person's testimony is true. But again, he doesn't tell us who he is himself, meaning the person who's claiming that he knows that the testimony is true. He doesn't tell us who he is, and he doesn't tell us which disciple he's talking about. But in any case, it's clear that this is not the disciple John himself saying this, because it's clear that the person is saying he knows that his testimony is true. If you were the writer yourself, right, and you were affirming yourself, you would say, hey, man, I wrote this down, and I know that what I'm telling you is the truth because I was there, or I saw it, you something to that effect, because I saw it myself, because I was there with Jesus, because I wasn't, something to say, okay, clearly the person who wrote this is also the person who is the eyewitness. But as you saw from Mr. Robert Kaiser, he says, neither of these passages therefore persuade many Johannine scholars that the author claims eyewitness status. Let's read further from this article on earlychristianwritings.com. He says, there is a case to be made that John, the son of Zebedee, had already died long before the Gospel of John came to be written. Let me read that again. There is a case to be made that John, the son of Zebedee, had already died long before the Gospel of John came to be written. It is worth noting for its own sake, even though the beloved disciple need not be identified with John, the son of Zebedee. In his 9th century chronicle, in the Codex, Coeslinianus, George Hartelos says of, quote on brackets, John was worthy of martyrdom. Harmatolos proceeds to quote Papias to the effect that he, i.e. John, was killed by the Jews. In the Debord fragment of an epitome of the 5th century chronicle of Philip of Sidé, the author quotes Papias. Papias in the second book says that John the Divine and James his brother were killed by Jews. Morton Enslein observes from his book Christian Beginnings, page 369 and 370, that Papias, a source of information, is simply an inference from Mark 10:35 through 40 or its parallel. Matthew 20 through 23 is possible. Nonetheless, this Markan passage itself affords solid ground. No reasonable interpretation of these words can deny the high probability that by the time these words were written, they say 70 CE, both brothers had drunk the cup that Jesus had drunk and had been baptized with the baptism with which he had been baptized. Since the patristic tradition is unanimous in identifying the beloved disciple with John, at least this evidence discredits the patristic tradition concerning the gospel, the authorship of the Gospel of John. So for those who may not have understood what's being said, basically these are further, he's just saying that, look, there were further evidence that John had gotten killed earlier. Okay, so although the patristics, meaning the church fathers, claim that it was written by John, this other evidence discredits the church father tradition concerning the authorship of the Gospel of John, because according to these other things, it said that John got killed, right? That he got killed or he died long before the Gospel of John was written. Therefore, these other evidences discredit the patristic tradition, meaning the church father tradition concerning the authorship of the Gospel of John. It goes on further to say, if the author of the Gospel of John were an eyewitness, presumably the author would have known that Jesus and his compatriots were permitted to enter the synagogue. But at several points, it is stated that those who acknowledged Jesus as the Christ during the life of Jesus were put out of the synagogue. This anachronism is inconceivable as the product of an eyewitness. So in other words, they're saying that the person who says this should have known that that wasn't the case, that Jesus and his disciples actually were allowed to enter into the synagogues. And so the person saying that they wasn't, this shows that this couldn't have been the writings of an eyewitness, because the eyewitness would have known that that's not true. Jesus and his disciples were allowed to enter the synagogue. So the person claiming that they weren't shows that this wasn't an eyewitness account. So you see, they're giving evidence why they're denying that John wrote the Gospel of John. See, we're not just saying it because we're just saying it. No, there's reasons why they say this. There's reasons why they're saying that John is not the writer of the Gospel of John. And these are among the different reasons why. So one, textually, it doesn't say so, right? It doesn't say so textually. Then they say historically, there's writings, these other writings that claim that John the Apostle had died long before the date of the writing of the gospel, or that he had been killed by the Jews, etc. prior, so he couldn't have been the writer. And then stuff like this, where there are things that are just incorrect in what happened in the story of Jesus, showing that clearly whoever wrote this wasn't an eyewitness, because they would have known that Jesus and his disciples were actually allowed to go into the synagogue. So these are a few reasons why. Okay. Then, of course, there's the famous P52, the Papyri 52, which is the fragment of the Gospel of John, and they date it to between 125 to 175 AD, which would have been clearly out of the life range of a disciple of Jesus, right? It would have been out of his life range to live that long and to have written it at that time. So this is another reason to discount that it was written by John. So again, study to show that you don't study. Even if you wanted to accept that Ibn Ishaq was claiming that, it still wouldn't prove anything, because Ibn Ishaq wasn't a Bible scholar. He had no access to, the information. And of course, that information wasn't available at that time anyway, right? This information about these manuscripts and all this stuff, this information was only found within the last, 150 years ago. So, you know what I mean? It wasn't like he was a Bible scholar and he had access to the manuscripts and he could say that John wrote it. If you wanted to take that position, if you still wanted to hold on to the idea that supposedly Ibn Ishaq is confirming that John the Baptist wrote John, it still wouldn't prove anything, because, we know that the manuscripts show, as we're demonstrating, show otherwise. So at the most, if you wanted to hold on to your claim that Ibn Ishaq affirms it, he is only affirming it in ignorance. He would only be saying that John the Baptist wrote, John the Apostle wrote the Gospel of John in ignorance, because he's not aware of the manuscript evidence, right? He's not aware of all these issues that we're bringing, right? So in any case, it still wouldn't prove that. It would just prove that Ibn Ishaq was ignorant of the Gospels and Bible textual studies, and he's making his statement out of ignorance. But as I already showed you, the other scholars of his contemporaries, they said he was a liar. They said he was unreliable. They said if he reports something by himself, it's unreliable, etc. And again, that passage that you read from the book, page 103, 104, clearly shows that he's reporting it himself. He said, these are the things that came to me, and he doesn't tell you from whom they came from. So based on that, we have to go with the scholars who said if he reports something by himself, he's unreliable, he's a liar. Okay, so again, you study to show that you don't really study. Okay, that you don't really study. But now let me show you further evidence why the Gospel of John is further not written by John, right, as an eyewitness account. So let's deal with that. So we're going to show you how further you have a problem to show that the Gospel of John was, or we can go either way. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So here we go in Matthew chapter 26, verse 39. This is the incident where Jesus is praying for God to save him, basically, from the event of the crucifixion, right? He wants the cup to be removed from him, meaning obviously the cup of the coming, attempt to kill him, etc., right? So it says in Matthew 26:39, it says, going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. Okay, and he did this about 3 times, right? He did it like several times. So that means it's clear he wants this fate to be removed from him. Okay, because he does it like 3 different times. He prays that time. Then he goes back to his disciples for a little bit. Then he goes back, he prays again. And then he goes back and he prays again. So it's clear he's serious, right? He's continuously praying, asking God, remove this, please. Remove this cup from me. Remove this cup. So that means he's pretty serious, right? That means he's pretty certain, like, I don't want this. I don't want this to happen. Please, I don't want this to happen, right? It's clear. And of course, this is repeated in the other Gospels as well. It's repeated in Mark chapter 14, verse 36, right? Actually, verse 35. Again, like I said, he prays more than one time. It's in Mark 14, 35 and 36. It says, going a little further, he fell to the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour would pass from him. Verse 36, he says it again. Abba, Father, he said, all things are possible for you. Take this cup from me, not yet what I will, but what you will. And then he goes back to the disciples and talks to them. Then he goes back and says it again. Okay, so it's clear, right? When you keep praying for something, that means you really want God to answer your prayer. You really are begging God, help me, please, help me, please, help me, please. Okay, so as you can see, he did it in Mark, he did it in Matthew, right? I believe it's even repeated in Luke. I believe it's repeated in Luke as well. Okay. Yeah, right. In Luke, it's the same thing. Luke chapter 22, verse 42. Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done. So again, as you can see, Mark, Matthew, and Luke have Jesus praying for the hour, the cup to pass from him. He prays for it more than one time, at least a couple of times or a few times, showing that he's very serious, that he wants it to be removed from him. But now, what's the problem here, everybody? Well, I'm going to show you what the problem is in this discussion about whether John is actually an eyewitness, right? The problem with this, everybody, is that John tells us something different. Yeah, John says something different. Look what John says Jesus said. It's the same incident, everybody. It's the same incident, right, where Jesus is supposedly praying. In all the other Gospels, he asks God to remove the cup from him, save him from the hour, right? But look how John changes what Jesus said. Watch this. I'm going to read it for you, all right? This is John chapter 12, verse 27. Look how John changes it. Now, he's asking a question. Jesus is speaking rhetorically. Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No! It was for this very reason that I came to this hour. Well, wait, hold up, stop. In Mark, Matthew, and Luke, Jesus is scared. He's scared. He doesn't want this to happen. He prays a few times, Father, remove this cup. Father, remove this cup. Father, please let the hour pass from me. Not my will, but your will be done. Did y'all catch it? Now look what happens with John. John says, nah, Jesus didn't say that. Jesus wasn't scared. Here, he gives us a confident Jesus, a Jesus who says, you know what? No, I will never ask for you to remove the cup because that's why I'm here. Y'all see that? Let me read it again. John 12:27. Now my soul is troubled. And what shall I say? It's a question. Father, save me from this hour. No, it was for this very reason I came to this hour. Hold up, hold up, hold up. Y'all see that? How John changes the story? Now John says that Jesus said, no, he wasn't scared to die. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't begging God to save him. Notice what he said. He says, Father, save me from this hour. No, I'm not asking you for that because that's why I'm here. I'm here for this very reason. So now John makes Jesus confident. Now John says Jesus didn't say, Father, remove the cup from me. That's a complete and blatant contradiction to the other three gospels. Study to show that you don't study. And any other hater who wants to use that argument, right? He's saying that Jesus said something different. So here's the problem, everybody. You got a problem either way. Either the other three gospels are correct, that Jesus begged God three different times to save him, remove the cup from him, and therefore John, or whoever wrote John, is a liar. Therefore, he's not an eyewitness, and therefore it wasn't written by the disciple John. Or we reverse it. Or if you want to claim that John was written by the disciple John, then John is correct and the other three gospels are their lies and they're wrong and they're not eyewitness account because they said Jesus was saying something different at that moment. See? So either one, you lose. Either Mark, Matthew, and Luke are liars and John is written by John, an eyewitness, and he told the correct thing that Jesus said, which was, no, Father, I'm not asking you to remove the cup because that's why I came here. I'm here to die. Like he's all, all arrogant and confident that I'm here for this reason. Or John is a liar and it wasn't written by John as an eyewitness. And Matthew, Mark, and Luke are correct. And therefore they're the correct ones supposedly. And John is the liar. And they're right that Jesus said, Father, remove the cup 3 times. Clearly showing that he really fervently wanted God to save him and remove the cup from him and to have the hour pass from him. And the Gospel of John is written by a liar, not by the Apostle John, not by an eyewitness. Take your pick, but either way, you lose. Either one you pick, you lose. And it's clear that you can't get around this one. It's clear this is a blatant difference in the story. It's a blatant difference. It is clear that John says Jesus didn't ask for that. He says, Father, save me from this hour. No. But in Mark and Matthew and Luke, yes, Father, please save me from this. Remove this cup from me. Right? Remove this cup from me. So somebody's lying. Somebody's not an apostle. Of course, we don't think any of them were apostles because clearly they can't get their story straight. But in any case, there's that difference between the 3 and the 1. For the sake of this argument, it's clear that John was not written by John the Apostle as an eyewitness because he's saying that Jesus said something completely different when he was in this moment of seeking help from God. According to John, Jesus wasn't afraid to die. According to John, Jesus did not ask the Father to remove the cup. Instead, no, he says, I'm here for this purpose. I'm here for this reason. But again, I clearly read what the other said, where Jesus clearly said, no, I am asking God, Father, please remove this cup 1 time. Father, remove this cup 2 times. Father, remove the cup. Please let the hour pass from me 3 times. 3 times he's clear he's not confident. It's clear that he is not this confident guy as John makes him out to be. Right? Right? It's clear. Right? It's clear that John is clearly not the eyewitness. Because, or either one. Or then if John is right, then the others are wrong. Right? Then the others are wrong. So you take your pick. You take your pick. Okay? You take your pick. No, we already showed that Ibn Ishaq is incorrect, and he's wrong, right? We already showed you that. Correction, he didn't beg. No, he begged when he's asking 3 times, when you're praying so hard that you're sweating blood. Yeah, that's begging, bro. You're begging and you're really praying very hard. And Ibn Ishaq is wrong, as I'm proving. So as I told you, take your pick. The other scholars said Ibn Ishaq was unreliable. Some even said he was an outright liar. In that reference, Ibn Ishaq doesn't tell you where he got it from. It's not like he says Muhammad told me or the Prophet said that John wrote John. He doesn't even name a companion even. So your use of Ibn Ishaq is complete failure. And then the evidence is against Ibn. If you wanted to hold that Ibn Ishaq is saying that, the evidence shows that Ibn Ishaq was mistaken. No, and I have no problem saying that outright and openly, because other scholars said he was unreliable. Other scholars said he was a liar. So I can say it too. As a lay Muslim, I can say, yeah, he was unreliable. He's wrong. He's mistaken. The evidence shows that he was wrong, that John wrote John, as I'm demonstrating right now. I'm demonstrating that he was mistaken. If you want to claim that Ibn Ishaq was saying that John wrote John, it's clear that he didn't write it. It's clear that he didn't write it, as I gave the other evidence that he couldn't have written it. Your other scholars have told you why, that he couldn't have written it. But let's go further to show you why John could not have been written by an eyewitness, or you got to reverse it, or you got a problem either way. Let's go to Mark chapter 15, verse 21. Mark chapter 15, verse 21, right? Here's another example. In Mark chapter 15, verse 21, this is after Jesus, when Jesus is being taken allegedly to the crucifixion event. It says, as they were taking him out, it says, now a certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. Right? They forced this guy, Simon of Cyrene, to carry the cross of Jesus. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Right? Who carried the cross, everybody? Simon. According to Mark, Simon carried it. According to Matthew, Simon carried it, right? Matthew 27:32 says the same way. Along the way, they found a man from Cyrene named Simon. They forced him to carry the cross of Jesus. Who carries the cross of Jesus, everybody? Simon of Cyrene or Cyrene. He carries the cross for Jesus. Luke 23:26 says the same thing. As the soldiers led him away, they seized Simon of Cyrene on his way in from the country and put the cross of him to carry behind Jesus. Right? So here we have this man, Simon of Cyrene, carrying the cross of Jesus. Right? However, when we turn to John, John tells us something different once again. John 19:17 seems to show that there was no guy named Simon there. Here's what it says, John 19:17. Let's start at verse 16. It says, then Pilate handed Jesus over to be crucified, and the soldiers took him away, carrying his own cross. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha or Golgotha. So you see, in the others, Simon of Cyrene is carrying it. But in John, Jesus carries his own cross. No mention of Simon at all. So again, you have a problem. If John is really the Apostle John and an eyewitness, how come he didn't see Simon carrying the cross? Why does he say Jesus carried his own cross to the place of the skull? Whereas Mark, Matthew, and Luke says this guy named Simon carried it. How come John didn't see Simon? Why is Simon completely left out of the story if he's an eyewitness? So again, you have a problem. If John is the Apostle John and an eyewitness, then Matthew, Mark, and Luke are wrong when they say that this guy named Simon carried the cross of Jesus instead of Jesus carrying his own cross. Right? So therefore, they're wrong. They're liars. They must not have been eyewitnesses. If they're eyewitnesses, then John is wrong. John is a liar. John is not an eyewitness and wasn't written by the apostle, because they said this guy named Simon. You got 3 verses 1. 3 verses 1 say this guy named Simon was made to carry the cross of Jesus, and he carried the cross to the place of the skull. But John says, nope, Jesus carried his own cross to the place of the skull. Somebody's lying, and somebody is not an eyewitness. Right? We got 3 versus 1. John is the odd man out. So again, I repeat, either way you cut it, you lose. If you say John is the eyewitness apostle, then the other disciples are liars and they're not eyewitnesses because they say something different than John said. If the others are written by supposed eyewitnesses, then John is wrong because John said Jesus carried his own cross. He said he's supposedly an eyewitness. He said, I saw John carry Jesus carried his own cross. But you can't have it both ways. You lose. Either way, you lose. Either way, if John is right and he's the eyewitness, then the other writings are not by apostles and they're not by eyewitnesses and they're wrong and they're liars. If the others are right, then John is the liar, or whoever wrote John is a liar, and it wasn't written by an eyewitness or the apostle because his story contradicts what the others said. Let me show you another example why it couldn't have been written by an eyewitness, i.e. John the apostle. That's if we're going to go with the other gospels. But again, I'm going to say the same thing. You got to take either or, but either one you take, you wind up losing. Let's go to another example. Another example is, let's start with Mark chapter 16, verse 14. This is the supposed after crucifixion appearances of Jesus, the alleged resurrected Jesus. Look at this, Mark chapter 16, verse 14. Right? Everybody's watching on YouTube? Good. Good. All right, everybody's watching? Good. All right, I see a couple of haters in the chat. So let's remove the haters. Remove the haters and the ignorant. So we're on Mark chapter 16, verse 14. What does it say? It says, later, Jesus appeared to the 11. I want y'all to take note of that number, 11. Later, Jesus appeared to the 11 as they were eating. He rebuked them for their lack of faith and their stubborn refusal to believe those who had seen him after he had risen. How many did he appear to, everybody? Jesus appeared to the 11. Right? Make sure you keep that number in your mind. 11. 11. 11. Right? 11. And after that, he had said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Notice he appeared to the 11. He basically rebuked them for their unbelief in seeing him. And after that, he said, go to all the world and preach. Right? How many did he appear to? 11. Great. You got it. Now let's go to Luke. Luke chapter 24, verse 33. Again, same incident after crucifixion appearance of Jesus. What happens? It says they got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together. How many? 11. 11. 11. 11. Okay? To the 11. Okay? 11. And the saying, the Lord has indeed risen and has appeared to Simon. That's the next verse. Then the two told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke bread, etc., etc. Right? So there you have that one. Okay? So as we can see, he appears unto the 11 in Mark. He appears unto the 11 in Luke. And I believe even in Matthew, we find the same thing, that he appears. Let's see, he appears unto the, in Matthew, the same thing. Matthew chapter 28, verse 16, it says, then the 11 disciples went to Galilee to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. How many? 11, 11, 11, 11, right? But once again, guess who's the odd man out? Guess who's the odd man out? The odd man out is once again John. John tells us something different, everybody. John tells us something different. Right? Let's see what John has. Let's see what John tells us. Yeah, go to John chapter 20. Let's see. Is this the one? Yeah, John chapter 20, verse 19. And what do we see? It says, on the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Next verse. After he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. And again, Jesus said, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you. And with that, he breathed on them and said, receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. And if you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven. By the way, let me take a note, even though this is not part of the subject. You know how the Christians always bring us this argument that Jesus must be God because he could forgive sins. Notice here, he says the disciples have the power to forgive sins. Not only do they have the power to forgive sins, the disciples also have the power to keep you not forgiven. Did you read that? It said, if you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven. So are the disciples God as well, Christians? Do you have more than a Trinity now? But that's a side note, just something to think about. That the disciples have the power to forgive you or not forgive you. And if they don't forgive you, your sins are not forgiven, Jesus said. The disciples have the power to not forgive you and make you unforgiven. But I thought Jesus died for everybody's sins, though, because this is after his alleged crucifixion. So how is it that the disciples have the power to keep you unforgiven if Jesus died for your sins? Something to think about, but let's not get distracted. Let's continue, because our point is that Jesus appeared to the 11 disciples and all the others. Now look what happens here. He appears apparently unto the 10 disciples, and now look what happens. Verse 24. It says, now one of the 12, Thomas, was not with the others when Jesus came. So that means what? That means only 10 disciples saw Jesus, right? Because Judas is dead already. He was number 12. Now, they said that when Jesus appeared to, and all that stuff that I just read from verse 19, Jesus obviously appeared to only 10 disciples. Because they said what? In verse 24, Thomas was not with them when Jesus came. So he appeared, that means he must have appeared to only 10 of them. Again, Judas already killed himself. He had betrayed Jesus. He wasn't there. And they say Thomas wasn't there either. So that means only 10 disciples were there when Jesus appeared. So now Thomas comes late. Verse 25. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. So according to John, if he's an eyewitness, the other three gospels are wrong then, because as I just read it to you, they said Jesus appeared unto the 11, unto the 11, unto the 11. Mark, Matthew, and Luke says Jesus appeared unto the 11. That means Thomas was there. Thomas was already there when Jesus appeared. But according to John, if John is the apostle John and an eyewitness, he says something different happened. He says when that event took place that Jesus appeared to the 10 disciples because he says Thomas wasn't there. So by default, that means only 10 disciples were there because Judas was gone already. So look what he says. He says, verse 26, a week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Verse 27, then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands, reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. This is the one that the Christians love to use, right? That Thomas supposedly said Jesus was his Lord and his God. But as you can see, this is made up by John, because in the other gospels, Jesus appears to all 11 together. Thomas is already there. And that's why none of the other gospels have Thomas saying anything like this. So that means this only happened one time. Whereas John says, oh, Jesus appeared first one time, and then Thomas came later, and they told him, and then Jesus came again and appeared, and then that's when Thomas said these words. But notice Mark doesn't have any recollection of this. Matthew doesn't have any recollection of this, nor does Luke have any recollection of this. Right? 3 verses 1. All the other 3 said he appeared unto the 11. They don't mention a second appearance where Thomas is now with them at a later time. And Thomas makes this statement, my Lord and my God. Mark doesn't say Thomas said that. Matter of fact, they don't say Thomas said anything out of the ordinary. Thomas is not mentioned saying anything. Matthew, Thomas doesn't say anything special or particular when this happened. Luke, Thomas doesn't say anything particular or special when this happened. The only one who says something different is John. John says that Jesus appeared more than once to them. The first time he appeared, Thomas wasn't with them. But as I read again, the others said he appeared unto the 11. And Thomas doesn't say anything. He doesn't call Jesus anything particular or special. But John says, oh, Jesus appeared more than one time to them. First, he appeared to them and only Thomas wasn't there. He appeared to the 10, obviously. Then Jesus comes a week later and now he appears to all 11. And Thomas now sees Jesus his first time and he makes this statement, my Lord and my God, supposedly. But again, take your pick. If John is the eyewitness apostle and writing as an eyewitness, then Matthew, Mark, and Luke are lying and they're wrong and can't be eyewitnesses because they don't say Thomas said anything. They say Jesus only appeared that time to the 11 and Thomas didn't say anything. Instead, Jesus rebuked all of them at once for not believing that he had appeared. Notice he doesn't single anybody out. He rebukes all of them in the other gospels. All 11. He appeared unto the 11. But here in John, John says, no, Thomas came later and then Jesus appeared another time. And then he was able to show Thomas himself and Thomas said these words. Why would the other gospels leave that out? How come 3 verses 1 don't say Thomas said anything if they're eyewitnesses too? So this is why you Christians can't have it both ways. They all can't be eyewitnesses and saying diametrically opposed, contradictory statements. They can't be all eyewitnesses. How is it that they're all eyewitnesses, but the others say that he appeared unto the 11? Thomas was already there, and that's why they don't have Thomas saying anything particular himself. But John is supposed an eyewitness too, and he says, oh yeah, as an eyewitness, Jesus appeared more than one time, first to the 10, then he appears to the 11 again a second time, and that's when Thomas says these words. How did the others leave that out? That those would have been important words, right? Why would you want to leave that out? Why would Mark and Matthew and Luke leave out that Thomas called Jesus allegedly his Lord and his God? Well, you know why? Because it clearly didn't happen. They never saw that. If they're eyewitnesses, they obviously never saw that. But how could they not have seen it? Because according to the story, they were all in that room together. So you Christians, you're not going to weasel out this one. You're not going to weasel out this and talk about perspective and this is his account and that's his. No. Because according to the thing, they were all in the room with the doors locked. And then Jesus appeared to all of them in the room. So there's no way you could say, well, maybe heads were in the way. No, they were all in the room. So how could they all be in the room and tell a different story of what happened? How could they all be in the room and nobody heard Thomas say, my Lord and my God? Mark didn't hear it. Matthew didn't hear it. Luke didn't hear it. But they're supposedly witnesses. John is in the room, but he heard something completely different from the rest of them, huh? He heard Thomas say, my Lord and my God, but Mark didn't hear him Thomas say that. Matthew didn't hear Thomas say that. Luke didn't hear him say that. But supposedly you guys believe that these are eyewitnesses. And the story says they were all in the room because they were afraid of the Jews. So they were hiding out in the room and Jesus appeared to them in the room. He appeared to them in that room and nobody heard him. The 3 of them didn't hear him say that. Instead, they say he appeared to the 11 and all he did was rebuke all of them for not believing that it was him. Nobody in particular special. Nobody said anything special. So again, either way you cut it, you lose. If John is the witness and he says that's what happened, then Matthew, Mark, and Luke are liars and are wrong and cannot be eyewitnesses. Because John says this is what happened. His story is different. If the others are correct, if Matthew, Mark, and Luke are the witnesses, and they said Thomas never, they don't even mention Thomas saying anything. They say Jesus appeared to the 11, then John cannot be the eyewitness, and John is the liar, and clearly not the eyewitness apostle. Take your pick, but either way, you lose. So, for everyone, this is the proof from all different angles that the Gospel of John is not written by the apostle John, right? But again, whichever way you pick it, you're going to wind up losing. If you do want to hold on that he was the witness, then you're going to have to throw the other gospels out. If you still want to hold on to the others, then you're going to have to say John, and which of course that has been done. That's why the others are called the synoptic gospels, because they don't quite perfectly fit together, but they more or less tell the same story. But John, his story is different. So the other three are called the synoptics because they more or less go along with the same synonymous story, although they differ in different ways as well, but more or less they tell pretty much the same thing. Whereas John's gospel has these very divergent versions of his story that diverge very hugely from the other gospels. Okay, so even your own scholarship had to acknowledge this, and that's why they have them called the synoptic gospels. But it is clear that it's not, he couldn't have been the eyewitness. Or again, if he is, then the others are wrong and they're not eyewitnesses. Take your pick. You can't keep both of them. You can't have your cake and eat it too, as they say. You can't, because the others, they contradict too much, or he contradicts them too much. And the thing with Ibn Ishaq, again, we've given you the reference that Ibn Ishaq doesn't prove that John wrote John. He doesn't say that the prophet told him. He doesn't say a companion told him. He just says that this is what came to me. This is what has come to me. But from where? From who? Who told you? Who came to you from where? See? So all he at most is repeating hearsay. He's just repeating hearsay and rumors. And again, he's wrong. We know that he's wrong about the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John was not written by John. The late dating of the earliest fragment is far out of the range of the lifetime of any apostle of Jesus. 125 to 175 clearly couldn't have been written by somebody who lived that long, who was from the time of Jesus. So clearly that's out. The other reasons that we showed you why John Kaiser talks about it, how the verses that they use, the John 21:24, is that 21? Is it 21:24? 23:24, right? How it doesn't, right? Yeah, the 21:24, how it doesn't actually show that it's an actual witness speaking. It's a person who is claiming that the testimony of the disciple is true, which means that obviously the disciple himself is not the writer. So that's why John Kaiser tells us that most Johannine scholars, because of this, they're not convinced that it was written by John the Apostle, right? Then we talked about how the scholarship shows that it was said that John died long before the time it was written, right? That there's evidence out there, information out there that the disciple John had died long before the Gospel of John came to be written, right? And how they talk about how others talked about how he was a martyr, that he had been killed by the Jews, etc. So showing that he had been killed before having a supposed chance to have even written the Gospel of John. And then, of course, the P52, which its dating is out of the lifetime. The other argument that they made about how if the author of the Gospel of John were an eyewitness, presumably the author would have known that Jesus and his compatriots were actually able to enter the synagogue. But at several points, it is stated that those who acknowledged Jesus as the Christ during the life of Jesus were put out of the synagogue. This anachronism is inconceivable as the product of an eyewitness. In other words, an eyewitness would have had that information correct. But since this person who wrote this gospel is saying that they were put out, meanwhile they weren't put out, they actually were allowed to go into the synagogues, proves that whoever wrote this was not an eyewitness. So the evidence is ample clear that the writer of the Gospel of John is not an eyewitness. Ibn Ishaq doesn't prove that the writer of John was an eyewitness. So the evidence is amply clear. That study to show that he doesn't study, and he has not studied. So we'll end it there. Again, don't forget to support the work. Right, yeah, that's what they're saying, brother or sister. They're saying that Ibn Ishaq supposedly says that John the disciple wrote the gospel. But it's clear that the evidence is ample that he didn't, he didn't say that. He just says that this is what has come to him. You know what I mean? Again, I'll read it again. Among the things which have reached me about what Jesus, the Son of Mary, stated in the gospel, which he received from God for the followers of the gospel, in applying a term to describe the apostle of God is, it goes on to say. So as you can see by his own statement, he's just saying ambiguously, among the things that have reached me about what Jesus, the Son of Mary. Again, he doesn't say reached him from who, reached him from where. So the most we could see is that he's speaking in a general, rumor hearsay type of fashion, because he doesn't tell us how it got to him or who it got to him by. Okay, so that's the most that we have. But again, he's wrong, right? If you want to claim that he's claiming that John wrote it, well, we know he's wrong. The evidence is ample that John didn't write John, as I already gave it to you. So I showed you from every angle: scholarship, right? The contradiction between John and the others, that how could he be an eyewitness if he's contradicting the other three, right? Yeah, about the same event. Now, remember, I showed you how they contradict on the same events. How, if you're an eyewitness, how are you saying something completely opposite and contradictory of other supposed eyewitnesses? So either one or the other is not an eyewitness, right? So we showed you in all the ways that it wasn't written by the Apostle John. So with that, I will go ahead and end it. Again, don't forget to support the work that we do by joining the Patreon, right? The link is in the description of the video. On Clubhouse, it's in the on my profile. You can go there, you can join the Patreon, and you can get these notes. Inshallah, I'll put these notes. Sometimes you got to bear with me because it takes me some time. I still got to put the notes up from the last one. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get the notes up. But have no fear, they will be up. They will be up. If you join now and they're not up yet, enjoy the other notes that are there. We have many other notes that address these issues: attacks against the Quran, evidence about Bible contradictions and other arguments and stuff like that. So in the meantime, until I get these up, you can still benefit from those other notes and things of that nature. So yeah, just go ahead and check it out, inshallah. If you are interested in just doing this is on Clubhouse as well. If you're interested in just doing if you just want to show some support, there's a new link that I have. It's called Buy Me a Coffee. You want to just show some love, you just want to show some support, and you just want to do something simple like that, and you're not interested in the notes, and you just want to say, hey, brother, I appreciate what you do. Here, let me get you a coffee. Check out that link that says Buy Me a Coffee. It's real simple. Just click on it. You say, I want to buy you a cup of coffee or 2 cups or whatever, and you can just donate like that and just buy the brother a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. I usually drink tea, but it's called Buy Me a Coffee. So if you just want to do something simple like that, check that out. That's also here on Clubhouse as well. You'll see the link on my profile. So if you just want to do something simple, be like, brother, I appreciate it. I just want to do something simple. Here, I'm gonna buy you a cup of tea for your work, bro. Just to show appreciation. You could do that too. But again, if you really want to get these notes, I highly recommend joining the Patreon. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and close out on YouTube. I'll open it up here on Clubhouse. So if you want to join a discussion, if you want to add some comments or whatever, a question, or you want to make a comment about what we talked about, come on over to the Clubhouse and we can get it, discuss it there. All right. So people on YouTube, I appreciate you checking in. May Allah reward you. May Allah guide you. And we end with that. We bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the last and final messenger. Ameen. So on YouTube, peace out. Assalamu alaikum. And if you want to continue, come check us out here on Clubhouse. All right. All right. Assalamu alaikum to the YouTube crowd. All right. So here on Clubhouse, anybody want to come up?